Okay, we are in chapter 3 talking about Nancy Kelsey. They had to make a huge decision to split up and go to California. Let's find out. All right, Nancy Kelsey is the lone woman. Imagine the situation. They're in the middle of nowhere, meeting the Shoshone tribe. Her clothes are falling apart, but does she panic? Nope. Nancy gets to work stitching together a usable dress from the remnants of her old ones. Kind of like when you have to scramble together a decent meal from the leftovers at the bottom of your fridge, right? And her shoes, they're worn through. The soles are gone. But again, she's not defeated. She cuts out leather piece by piece and she slips them inside her shoes, a bit like slipping insole cushions in your shoes on days when you know that you're going to be walking a lot. And she didn't stop at her own needs. She was mending clothes for everyone who needed help. Imagine a mobile seamstress in the middle of a wild mountain range. Amazing, right? On the fourth day of their journey, hunger struck. Think of those days when you couldn't find anything to eat. They had to kill an ox, their beast of burden, for food. Then a ray of hope. More Indians arrived, trading horses for powder and lead. It's like finding a gas station in the middle of a desolate highway, right? They even had a little treat, service berries, which Nancy's daughter savored one by one. It was like savoring candy when you hadn't had sweets in a while. Their story is a testament to the human spirit and ingenuity. It reminds us that when things get tough, we get tougher. But then let's talk about the next part. Strenuous mountains and stumbling into California. Here is a summary of the last leg of their trek. As their journey continued, it got harder and harder. They battled thirst, hunger, dying livestock, strenuous mountain ranges, plenty of quarreling amongst the men, and more challenges. But the hunters in their group were jubilant, for they found and shot 13 deer and elk, talking excitedly about the bounty of the place they camped, faced with another set of mountains that lay before them. The consensus was that they were still 500 miles from the Pacific, and winter was on them. Bidwell was keeping track of the date in his journal and told them it was now November 4th. Nancy, Ann, and their entire group grew stronger with the succulent meat. Ann grew happier as her mother watched. With every bite, she seemed stronger, her eyes brighter, and her eating more eager. For the rest of the day, they did nothing but eat and rest. Nancy felt stronger, but as she followed Ben along, every step took some of it away. She hooked the blanket around her to carry Ann, afraid her arms might weaken and she might drop the child. The river's bed was a broad wash, tumbled with great trees and heaps of flood-driven brush, with broad stretches of sand and pebbles in between. They climbed down the high bank into it to go across it, and she had to stop at the bottom of the bank and catch her breath. She could hear wild birds calling in the grass above her head. Crossing the river, she saw the tracks of cloven hooves, big and little, by the hundreds. Before long, Bidwell and the others caught up with them, all but Bartleson and his crew, who had stayed behind to make meat. But there was meat everywhere. As the settlers pushed on, they passed through the middle of the huge herd of elk scattered across the plain. Flocks of birds shrieked and flapped across the riverbanks. Among the thickets along the banks of the river, Nancy found more wild grapes and fat purple berries and seeds. The giant two-horned mountain loomed over them. That's El Diablo. That night they camped by a river and ate well again, but they all knew hard times still lay ahead of them. The next day, as they set forth again, they spied Bartleson and his company coming along after them on foot. The settlers were moving along the flat grassland, heading due west. A long, low line of dark trees to the southwest promised a river, and they were discussing sending out scouts when Bartleson and his men caught up with them. They staggered up, grim-faced and weary. Indians had stolen all their horses during the night. They had nothing left but what they carried in their hands. This was a disaster. Bartleson's horses and mules were the only sound animals the group had. The few remaining to them now were walking skeletons, although the excellent valley grass was having a reviving effect on them. In any case, Ben got everyone to agree that 2 of these horses would carry scouts out to sea if the dark trees over there marked a river. The rest of them would stop over for a while and let Bartleson and his men rest. Nancy sank down at once. She knew it was not Bartleson whom Ben Kelsey wanted to rest. Anne was sleeping in her arms, and for a while she merely lay there in the luxury of not having to walk. Then, stronger for it, she got up and, with the baby still asleep, went off over the yellow plain, looking for more grapes and berries. And remember, she's pregnant. The beauty of the land seduced her. She stood a long while looking around her, feeding her eyes on the teeming richness of this landscape, so gently warmed in the sun. The golden plain stretched away towards the hills to the east, where she had just been. In the middle distance of the long, dark braid of bodies crept along, some vast herd, elk probably, or antelope. The hills were darker than the plain, almost purple. In the creases grew thick, dark green trees and brush. It was a sweet, serene place. She thought swiftly that she would like to live here. Behind her, someone yelled her name. She turned. Ben was running toward her. His face blazed with excitement. "Nancy! Andy! He's here!" He rushed up to her, seized her by the arm, and beamed into her face. "I mean, he's not here, but Jones is, and we are. Nancy, we're here. We did it. We're in California." I'm getting shivers just from that. She laughed. "What? Make sense, will you, Ben Kelsey?" But she understood him. Amazed, she laughed again and then flung herself into his arms. And it was true. Thomas Jones, who had vanished in the mountains with Andy Kelsey, had suddenly reappeared, riding into their camp. He and Andy had reached this valley only a few days before. Andy was out looking for them too. He would catch up with them in good time. And Jones had brought along an Indian, shy and wide-eyed, wearing a blue cloth coat. Whenever the settlers looked at him, this man said over and over, "Marsh, Marsh," and pointed to the west. They had found Dr. Marsh, whose letters had brought them across the continent. The trek was over. They had reached California. And the giant 2-horned mountain that loomed above them was Mount Diablo, located in what is now the East Bay region of the San Francisco Bay. So yeah, Nancy Kelsey, November 1841, first white woman to cross into California. You'll find out more about her in the next video, but if you'd like to read ahead, feel free to grab my book, We Aren't Going Back, A History of Women's Social Progress Over 200 Years. All right, see you in the next video.